Why doesn't Japan like Sonic?
The Sonic the Hedgehog franchise has been making a great deal of effort to appeal to Japanese audiences lately. Hasn't been working out. Why doesn't Sonic do well in Japan? That's the question. I mean, it's a little weird, right? Like, the series was created in Japan by Sega nonetheless, a company extremely prevalent in the Japanese gaming scene. Yet for whatever reason, their goddamn mascot can't seem to find an audience beyond a mere few thousand. And despite their best attempts at trying to appeal to the Japanese market, from content creator collaborations to crossovers with popular brands, to even changing the name of their third movie to Sonic X Shadow Tokyo Mission in an attempt to drum up a few extra box office dollars, none of it seems to be
crazy.
working.
I never heard about
Why?
that.
Is the question again. Obviously, there's one simple answer to this, right? You've all been screaming it at your screens from the second you saw the thumbnail. Well, of course Sonic doesn't do well in Japan. He was a franchise conceived for a Western market. What do you expected? Cue the outro. But I don't know. It's not like there's nothing that focuses on the Western market that isn't also popular there, right? What about... I gotta think about some. Disney? Baseball? KFC? I guess my point is, it's not as if it's impossible for Sonic games to be popular in Japan. Like, you know, they did pretty well for a while. Sure, they didn't pull in the numbers of other more popular series, but the early Sonic games, until Heroes really, didn't do horribly in Japan. Surely a couple 100,000 copies is a whole lot better than 7. Even Sonic Frontiers, for as middling of a game as it may have critically been, sold a reasonably impressive 46,000 copies in Japan in its first week. So clearly there is a way of breaking through to the market, and so I don't think it's impossible for Sega to someday have the series sell those 6-digit figures again in the region. So let's talk about why and how. This video is sponsored by Manscaped, the men's grooming brand trusted by all that they
I'm sorry, I don't care.
And thanks Manscaped for sponsoring this video. So yeah, the argument that always comes up when you talk about Japan not liking Sonic is that the franchise has spent most of its years trying to market itself towards the exact opposite demographic, and I mean, yeah, that's true. They kinda shot themselves in the foot when it came to trying to make Sonic as hip and edgy as possible, but at the same time, Japan and Europe did get themselves a more tame version of the character. The edgiest we saw Sonic was mainly shown to those Western audiences, to massive success. It's unlikely most Japanese gamers at the time even knew this extra edgy Greg Martin Sonic even existed. And like I said earlier, the original entries in the franchise didn't sell horribly. It wasn't the biggest thing around, but it was still a decently successful franchise. I mean, that's bound to happen when you slap his face on everything. The seals didn't take a serious dip until the likes of Shadow the Hedgehog and Sonic 06 were releasing, and in those cases, I don't know, is it a surprise that they weren't selling? In reality, I think you can pinpoint the second the Sonic series was set off course in Japan back to the release of Sonic Adventure 2. You gotta remember, until then, graphics in video games were primitive enough to be interpreted in different ways. You could show someone this sprite and someone might think it looks like this, or hell, even like this. At a certain point though, the artist's intent became inarguable. Video game graphics had gotten to such an impressive point where you could definitively discern how something would look in a 3D space with semi-realistic textures. Suddenly it was common and expected for games to have voice acting and extended cutscenes. No longer did you have to seek out the manual to be informed of why you're doing anything. The games now more explicitly featured that content themselves. It had to be set in stone. No longer could you get away with having one region's game manual call this character Amy Rose, yet in another Sally Acorn because it's a name that region recognizes. That becomes a lot harder to pull off when you gotta say your name and code it into the subtitles. Now the internet is more prevalent and people can look up and question why they aren't getting the same version of a game as everyone else. Really, the Sega Saturn was the prime time for Sonic Team to further increase Sonic's popularity in Japan, easily being Sega's best-selling console in the region, mostly for its wide selection of excellent RPGs, none of which I've ever played. They missed quite possibly their best chance to cement Sonic's character there. But because they were more concerned with starting up Nights into Dreams, and Sega of America's pure incompetence in getting another Sonic game out for the system, Sonic only fell further into obscurity. I think that's something important to note. Sonic's lack of success in Japan wasn't a given. It wasn't something set in stone the second the first game was released. It was the result of years of mismanagement. And in a lot of cases, a lack of consideration for the region. Consideration that all but dropped entirely after the release of Sonic Adventure. Back then, Sonic's world was bright, colorful, abstract, and the first adventure game kept that approach, while also taking inspiration from monster movies. You know, for all intents and purposes, Perfect Chaos is just Godzilla.
I loved Perfect
The
Chaos.
first adventure game still managed to appeal to the
And I
Japanese,
haven't played Sonic
selling
Adventure
almost
yet.
500,000 copies. Adventure 2, less than a quarter of that. I wonder what could have possibly happened between these two games to create that sudden lack of interest. I don't know, maybe it's this guy? Sonic Adventure 2 took a much more realistic approach to its art design. Suddenly you could tell this was San Francisco, this was the American government, this was America. Sonic was also much less cute in how he was presented. The Japanese are known for loving their cute chibi characters. Just take a look at how Sony presented Crash in the region to cater to that. But with Sonic, it was the opposite approach. They slimmed him down, gave him hip, real grindable shoes. He looked angrier. Whereas Adventure 1 Sonic retained some of his more classic features, Adventure 2 Sonic was made actively in spite of it, Yuji Naka himself admitting this was a goal of theirs during the Dreamcast era. So, when it came time to do Sonic Adventure in 1998, we were worried that if he became too cutesy, he would end up just like every other cute, cloying character mascot. So for the Dreamcast, we deliberately tried to strengthen his original bad boy image. Is the quote. Now instead of being like a monster movie, Adventure 2 was more of a disaster flick. Shadow the Hedgehog would now make direct reference to Independence Day. Doesn't matter what the occasional blip like Heroes does. I'm sure as far as the Japanese were concerned, Sonic wasn't doing anything to appeal to them, so why bother checking to see if the next entry will change that? The way more direct Western approach only grew, reaching a breaking point with Sonic 06, and neither games weren't even good enough to take interest from a gameplay side either. So why did Japan stop caring about Sonic? Because Sonic stopped caring about Japan. I'm sure most over there only got exposed to Sonic through his position as Sega's mascot. That's all he is to some of them. Just like this fucking guy is Sammy's mascot. I got no clue who or what the fuck
Who
this
the
is from,
hell
but
is
he's always
that?
plastered next to him. From there, any attempt to rectify this issue was basically too little too late. Only a couple of years after Yuji Naka wanted to make Sonic more overtly edgy, and Sonic Adventure 2 went out of its way to directly target a Western demographic, it seems like they were already realizing that completely alienating a market isn't a good thing. They created Sonic X in a direct attempt to increase the series' popularity in Japan, failed so miserably it got cancelled after 2 seasons. And, in the most ironic outcome possible, the series succeeded so well in the US that they commissioned a 3rd season only for them. They had succeeded at appealing to Westerners too much. It was like nothing would change this outcome. And so, why bother? Why even attempt to make Sonic popular in a country that just doesn't care? From here, the franchise only...
I like that they didn't just cater to, like, Japan, and that they more catered to, like, Western audiences. Because, like, it made Sonic cooler, you know? Like, he has that aesthetic about him, that, like, instead of being all cutesy and stuff.
further strayed away from what Japanese audiences enjoy. After Unleashed, the series made a conscious effort to market itself towards a younger crowd, turning into more of a Saturday morning comedy with writing you'd expect from an early 2010s Cartoon Network show more than anything you'd want from the Sonic the Hedgehog series. I mean, why stop there? Bam! 2014 Cartoon Network show. Sonic Boom was like an admission of defeat. The series isn't even all that popular in the US anymore. Fuck it, go all in. Only push the Japanese gamers further away. They completely embraced this Western focus, redesigning all the characters, focusing more on Sonic and silly sitcom adventures, and when releasing it in Japan, they just straight up called it Sonic Toon. I don't think it surprises anyone that Frontiers has become the best-selling Sonic game in the region in over 20 years, since Adventure. Huh. I wonder what these two games have in common. There were RPG elements again, it had a huge world to explore, the story was finally taking itself more seriously again. The game was even rewritten entirely by the game's director for the region in order to appeal more to gamers over there better. I don't think it's to anyone's shock this was immediately followed by Shadow Generations flopping spectacularly, despite selling incredibly well in other countries. At least with Superstars you could excuse it by bringing up Mario Wonder releasing at the same time. Why give Sonic a chance when tried and true Mario is over there delivering one of his best 2D platformers ever? But with Shadow Generations, you know, it's a remaster of a game that already didn't do well over there. So I don't think there was much hope of a re-release doing better. And that brings us to where we are today. Sonic Cross World's absolutely flopping despite an incredibly strong attempt to market the game more over there. Well, if I were to make a guess as to why it didn't do as well as they'd hoped, I would have to assume it was because of a few key factors, the biggest one in my opinion being, the main games don't even do well. If your mainline entries can barely crack 10k copies over there, then why would a spin-off miraculously do gangbusters? They attempted to rectify this with their collab characters, Joker, Hatsune Miku, etc. And I don't know how many people are going to be enticed to purchase a $70 game just to play as one single character they like. 90 if they're part of the season pass, and especially without their iconic voices. And if they did want to buy the game to play as the guy from Yakuza or SpongeBob SquarePants, well, you're gonna have to wait a few months. What's the use in buying a game for one character who hasn't even been added yet? So we may actually see sales pick up a bit once some of those DLC characters are released, but that's also assuming the game's player base doesn't completely die by then. You want to play as Mega Man? Better hope the game is still kicking a whole year from now. Currently it's dying on Steam to a pretty consistent 3,000 players at a time. That doesn't take into account those playing on consoles, but like, is that a good number? Yes? No? I don't know. The game has only been out for a month. Sega keeps promising
game's
further
doing
DLC
well, I
if the
think.
game performs well, but I don't know, is that number good enough? Will it go even further down by the time the final DLC comes out? I ain't a time traveler, ask me in a year. Now this isn't to say Sega was stupid to try and market the game in Japan. They should continue doing that if anything. But in retrospect, I think it was a little comical to assume that Sonic Kart Racing spin-off would come in and blow up the sales charts in Japan. Especially so soon after the release of Mario Kart World. I mean, hey, sold better than Garfield Kart 2 at least. All you can drift. It was just an unfortunate set of circumstances a potential buyer has to get over to be interested in picking it up. And when a vast majority of them already don't give a shit about Sonic in the first place, I don't think there was much hope of things going any differently, especially since most of the content Japanese gamers would want to actually check out isn't even released yet. But again, to reiterate, I still don't think this was misplaced effort. If anything, I can respect strategies like this much more compared to changing a movie title and assuming that would make all the difference. Like I've shown, it's not like the series was never able to hit those six-figure sales in the past. It really just appears that the time period between 2006 and 2021 really dampened his image over there. To something worse than hatred or disinterest, it's being unaware of his existence altogether. Like, sure, Sonic was a laughingstock over here for 15 years, but at least people were still talking about him. But a string of solid releases and less willingness to alienate an entire audience definitely hasn't gone unnoticed over there. Frontiers is proof of that. Sonic does still have the chance to become more popular in Japan. It's just gonna be a big uphill battle to reintroduce him into the mainstream again. An effort I hope Sega doesn't give up on just because a few releases haven't sold as well as they hoped. There's no chance of the next Sonic game doing incredibly well in Japan, but who cares? Right now their goal should be to ensure each new entry does a little better than the last. And so because of that, despite a few bumps in the road, Sega's strategy is working. It's just working really, really slowly. So for the first time in his life, maybe Sonic just has to take things slow.
I like that. BRB, okay.